In this tutorial, you will learn about CSS position property. The position property specifies the type of positioning method used for an element. The position property specifies the type of positioning method used for an element. There are 5 different position values, and they are static, relative, fixed, absolute, and sticky. Elements are then positioned using the top, bottom, left, and right properties. However, these properties will not work unless the position property is set first. They also work differently depending on the position value. So over here, I have included all the 5 values of position property in the body section. So we will go through them one by one. So the first value is static. HTML elements are positioned static by default. Static positioned elements are not affected by the top, bottom, left, and right properties. An element with position static is not positioned in any special way. It is always positioned according to the normal flow of the page. So the first div on the browser displays static value for position property. So this particular div element has value static for position property. Then the next value is relative. An element with position relative is positioned relative to its normal position. Setting the top, right, bottom, and left properties of a relatively positioned element will cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position. Other content will not be adjusted to fit into any gap left by the element. So in the CSS file, I have written the position property. So this is where I have styled those divisions. So for the relative value, for position relative, this is the code, and the properties I have written inside the curly braces. And this is how it looks on the browser. For this div element position, the value of position property is relative. And that is why it is positioned relative to its normal position. Then the next value for position property is fixed. In the HTML file, I have written the code over here. An element with position fixed is positioned relative to the viewport, which means it always stays in the same place even if the page is scrolled. The top, right, bottom, and left properties are used to position the element. A fixed element does not have a gap in the page where it would normally have been located. So in the CSS file, I have written the position property, and I have set the values of bottom, right to 0, bottom and right to 0, and the width is 300 pixels of the division, and the border, for the border shorthand property, I have given these values. And this is how it looks on the browser. So over here you can see that this div element is fixed, and the position for the div element was bottom, right, 0. That is why it is placed over here, and as I am scrolling, this particular division will not move from its position. So that is because of the fixed value of the position property. Then the next value of position property that we are going to study is absolute. And the code in the HTML file is over here. So in this I have used two classes, that is, and the values of those classes are relative 1 and absolute. An element with position absolute is position relative to the nearest position ancestor. That is, instead of position relative to the viewport, like fixed. However, if an absolute positioned element has no positioned ancestors, it uses the document body and moves along with the page scrolling. A positioned element is one whose position is anything except static. So this particular division displays position absolute. Then the next value of position property is sticky, and the HTML code is over here. An element with position sticky is positioned based on the user's scroll position. A sticky element toggles between relative and fixed depending on the scroll position. It is positioned relative until a given offset position is met in the viewport, then it sticks in place like position fixed. So in the CSS file, I have styled that division like this. So the value of the position property is sticky. I have written this particular line because Internet Explorer does not support sticky positioning. But right now we are using Google Chrome, so it's fine if we don't write this line. Then the position for sticky, then I've used the top property and I've set the value to 0, and the padding is 5 pixel, and background color and border, the values of background color and border shorthand property are these. So on the browser you will see that this particular division, the value of the position property for this particular division is sticky. So when I scroll through the window, you will see that this particular division will stick to the top of the window. That is because we have set the value of top property to 0 and the position is sticky for that division. Lastly, we are going to study overlapping elements. So this is the HTML code. Basically, this will appear on the browser. When elements are positioned, they can overlap other elements. The z-index property specifies the stack order of an element, that is, which element should be placed in front of or behind the others. An element can have a positive or negative stack order. So over here, first I have written one heading, then there's an image, and then there's another heading and a paragraph. And I have set the z-index for the image to -1. That is why on the browser you will see that because the image has a z-index of -1, it will be placed behind the text. So that is how you can overlap elements. I hope you have understood the CSS position property. Thank you.